So let's get into this book. Now inside you immediately have a disclaimer and a dedication. I'm not going to rant about the dedication. That'd be rude. I'm better than that. Then we have an introduction. Now, this is where it earned its first yellow tab. The introduction is basically a giant political rant at you before ending with a slight introduction of Evan Baird, which is completely pointless because at most this section tells you how old Evan is, which is about 40. So we get into the first chapter. Chapter 1, The Alliance. So this first chapter is... there's not much to talk about, really. It serves as an introduction to the two main characters and their beliefs, effectively, for a book. It's very direct, and most of the chapter is just a giant exposition dump explaining who they are, their mobile preparations, and the inevitable collapse of society, because the president they don't like is in charge. These rants, the political rants in this book, are rarely intertwined well, and they don't feel like someone is talking rather than the author who is just picking up a pen and ranting about what he doesn't like and doomsaying a bunch. So all in all, this chapter is mostly just a clunky exposition dump. There's not much to rant, there's not much to talk about it, and it's not a good demonstration about how bad this really gets later. Chapter 2, Flight 4225. Chapter 2 is the chapter where we follow our characters from their homes and going to New York City. This is also where we're introduced to Glenn and Peggy. They're all members of the airline crew. The only members worth remembering, but even then. Now, the introductions are pretty funny, ironically so. He's not trying to be funny here. See, here's how Glenn's introduced.
Glenn had been with the company for several years, and was a fun, entertaining guy to have along. He lived in Boston, and like Evan, commuted to Columbus for work, always cracking jokes with a twisted and unabashed sense of humor. He kept things lively.
And here's how Peggy's introduced.
Peggy was a new hire just out of initial training. At 26 years old, she was eager to start a new life for herself after a painful divorce. She was a single mother with a 5-year-old son named Zach. Her parents were comfortably retired and lived just across the river from Cincinnati in Newport, Kentucky. They graciously volunteered to watch her son while she was away for work. They knew that she needed this change in her life, so they were willing to accommodate her in any way they could. This was only her second real trip flying the line after her completion of training. She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement about the next 4 days on the road. No, it doesn't stop there. I'm cutting here for time.
Can you tell me which one will end up becoming a main character? You get 3 guesses. The first 2 don't count. We also get some real fun dialogue here, just showcasing Bird's amazing talent for writing.
Today is a total waste of a day of my life, as Evan put it. Only one flight to JFK and we're done for the day. Stuck in that place. Evan said this aloud.
So this is about where you start to realize that Bird is not a great writer. The prose of this book is choppy and short, with the flow so bad, no sentence really ever weaves into the next. Each time a sentence ends, each time you see that period, it's like, boom, slamming into a wall before picking yourself up and sprinting face first into the next wall. Bird also really has this strange thing he likes to do around this book. It pops up first here, but he does it often enough that I noticed it. And this is what I call basically the laugh around the water cooler moment. It's where all the characters, for some reason, gather in one area, one says a joke, they all laugh before moving on as if nothing happened. Now this isn't something I would normally talk about, but Bird is so overly fond of this trope and does it several times before the end of the story, even when it's not appropriate. Like, literally, just after they finished running for their lives, they all gather around, joke! Ha 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 ha! It's just... Before the chapter is over, we get 2 more unsettled political rants that are not so subtly hinting at the coming collapse and just a fundamental misunderstanding of certain politics. Like, I love this little line as someone who actually knows politics. They go, damn straight. You gun nuts just keep to your Tea Party rallies and Klan meetings and leave the clubs to the rest of us, Glenn said, jokingly. Deal. Except for the Klan part, of course. You do realize your side founded the KKK, right? Evan replied.
Secondly, bull. Because a lot of people like to skip over the fact that when it comes to race relations, historically, Republicans and Democrats switched positions. Yeah, Republicans were basically Democrats, and the Democrats were basically Republicans.
Fun fact. Been to 10. Fun fact. While the people who did found the KKK were Democrats, the two-party stance of black voters has fundamentally changed since Lyndon B. Johnson's Voting Rights Act and civil rights legislation. The Democrats became the favored party of black voters and the racist voters who opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Obviously, the KKK left the Democratic Party to go Republican. Also, not to beat a dead horse, but I don't recall the KKK supporting the Democratic nominee for the president in 2020. Just putting that out there.
Will be Donald Trump's most loyal advocate to make sure his nominees go to the Supreme Court.
Of course, this was in 2014. Effectively, this chapter says to be nothing more than a couple more political statements from Bird and an unsettled foreshadowing with the riot at a food bank that something bad is going to go down. As we get near the end of the chapter, this is where we start to get a clear look at the style this book is going for. Something akin to a third-person limited, the omniscient, where it follows multiple characters, but the entire thing is written like someone is sitting down across the bar from you and is just telling you the story secondhand. I want to liken it to a style like A Wizard of Earthsea, where it's more where it's occasionally throughout the story you're getting hints that this is just a tale being told to you in the future. That this stuff has already happened, and happened a while ago. But it's unlike this because I do not want to insult this book, even if I didn't like it as much as everyone else did. Mostly because of the writing style. I had nothing wrong with the story itself. But comparing this book to this book is majorly insulting. I'm sorry. I will read you as an apology. Another more popular example, just to take some of the heat off of Wizard of Earthsea there, is One Piece. Now, One Piece, occasionally, the narrative will stop and mention that this particular event is known in the future as X and X, and led to this. However, unlike either of these two examples with Wizard of Earthsea or One Piece, this story doesn't drag you in. These aren't little neat snapshots that you're reading, like you're reading this story from a history book, and you're just getting these sudden breaks to remind you, hey, this already happened. No, like I said, it constantly stops and stutters. You're very aware the entire time you're reading a book, and never once does it make you unaware. The constant clunky dialogue also adds to that. It's just, like I said, this book is not written well at all. Finally, we get to Chapter 3. Chapter 3, The Layover. Chapter 3 starts with Evan and Jason getting to the hotel, signing in, and deciding to go to a nearby pub for a drink and some bangers and mash. That's a direct quote. Peggy, who, despite having just told Clint that she didn't have the money to go out, and then confiding in the two main characters that she was also too afraid to leave the hotel due to the riot they saw earlier, suddenly decides that, oh, well, you know what? I will go to that pub with you filled with drunken men. However, the big part of this chapter is that this is where things start to happen. While drinking, the power goes out, and Evan and Jason, are ever impeccable heroes, immediately realize that something is going down, and quickly flee to the nearby hotel, taking a nervous Peggy in tow. And within a couple minutes of the power grid going out, people are already apparently starting to shoot each other in the street. They head back to the hotel, crash out for the night, and then wake up the next morning to a group of people harassing the hotel staff. Despite only being 12 hours, apparently all the refrigerated items have spoiled without electricity. I'm gonna chalk this up to more of a thing to do with health code violations and standards rather than the food actually being spoiled. And the staff is putting up pretty much everything buffet style to placate people. As the people devolve into practically a fist fight over the feast, Evan notices someone else standing in the back, and this is where we're introduced to Damon. Oh, don't worry. Bird makes sure to give Damon a great first impression by mocking panicking people.
My, how quickly the weak crumble. The other man said,
My thoughts exactly. Just imagine how they're going to behave after a few days without society holding their hands.
Evan stuck his hand out and said, Evan Baird, pleased to meet you.
So yeah, they're real stand-up guys. Anyways, they talk for a moment, with Damon informing him that an overly talkative EMT gave a complete rundown on how bad everything is to a random citizen who just walked up to him, and I don't know, maybe that's true, maybe an EMT would do that, but for some reason I feel like if an EMT is responding to a call and a civilian walked up to him and said, "What's going on?" the EMT would probably not be like, "Okay, well, a whole bunch of people are dead here, here, and here, society's collapsing here, terrorists are attacking over there." Again, maybe I'm wrong. My dad was a cop, so I have some understanding that, you don't go around and just tell people stuff like this because it'll create a panic, but this is EMT, so it might be different. Of course, that we get this point where Glenn is probably dead. I mean, of course he is. He didn't agree politically with the main characters. So after this, the two, Damon and Evan, decide to combine forces so that they can help Damon get to a nearby set of docks where his brother's boat is, and Damon will take them out of the city on his boat. The whole group is brought in to introduce themselves to each other. Now, there's a strange interaction here, and the only reason I can assume Bird wrote this is because he needed Damon to figure out how Evan and Jason are armed somehow, despite Evan and Jason talking about how they don't want to tell anyone they're armed. But this whole exchange it doesn't make sense.
You three help me get to it, get it going, and ride shotgun for me along the way. Ride shotgun? Evan said with a raised eyebrow. How did you know that we were armed? You're armed? Damon questioned with a smile. Heck, that's even better.
Why does Evan immediately assume that Damon knows they're armed because that phrase? The book was published in 2014, and riding shotgun has been common parlance for years. Even worse so when Jason, later on in this book, uses it colloquially too. The whole point is that this feels weird and clunky, and I hate it. But anyways, after they agree on a plan, in a long, drawn-out sequence, they eventually get approached by a random guy who goes up to Peggy and demands she gives up what food she has. Evan steps in, refuses to let Peggy get bullied like that, and the guy runs off with a vague threat that he'll return. And this is about as good of a point as any to talk about this, because this will pop up again and frequently. Bird is not interested in telling two sides of the story. Again, conservative comfort. And this becomes increasingly obvious as time goes on. The people who go against our heroes only do so because they're bullies. They don't have logical reasoning. They don't have genuine plans. They don't have real reasons. Bird has these people do these things simply to show how bad they are. And this isn't just thugs. He uses the same exact method for DHS agents later on, where they go around, steal everyone's food, and they're portrayed more as bullies than actual people who are listening to orders they're given in a state of emergency. They're always faceless, except for a single instance. They're always quickly dealt with, almost as quickly as they're introduced. And the reasonings are always selfish and antagonistic. I can assume, because very rarely do we get their reasonings. They're just doing it to be bullies. This would be fine in small, narrow instances, but this is every antagonistic force they come across, and it becomes quickly apparent, which in turn causes it to lose all its effectiveness. Take, for example, this guy. Listen to this and tell me, does this sound like a real person?
Give us what you have. We are collecting all the food in the building. It will then be handed back out accordingly. At the time, Evan heard what was going on and walked quickly towards Peggy's room. He looked at the man with a scowl and said, "She's not giving you anything. You got no right to demand what others have, so just move along." "Look, buddy," he replied while pointing his finger at Evan in an aggressive manner. "This ain't over. I'm gonna tell the others, and you will give it up."
Does that sound like something some guy would say? less than a day after everything went wrong. No, this is Bird creating a straw man that Evan and Jason have to beat down and prove superiority over, because by defeating him, they prove the superior nature of their political ideology. This guy, for instance, after getting chased off by Evan, returns later that night with a group of people, and attempts to take what food that they do have. Evan and Jason quickly kill a couple because they're badass heroes who don't need to struggle, and chase off the remainder before plotting their escape tomorrow. And that's basically where the chapter ends. But let me dig a little more into this point. How would I have written this? Make his reasoning make sense, and try to make him seem like, I don't know, a person? Says he goes up to Peggy and tells her, hey, considering the situation, some of us are thinking that it might be better to gather up what food we have now, and then ration it to make it through this crisis. Have Peggy considering it, legitimately, not terrified. She's actually thinking, maybe this is a good idea. Only for Evan to interrupt and tell him off. Make the guy seemingly get the hint. Though introduce a couple subtle, actually subtle, not Bird's idea of subtle, because this is Bird's idea of subtle. Couple subtle hints that he's mad at Evan for getting involved. Now, we have a reasonable antagonist and some small reason to doubt Evan. Is he just being selfish? Or is this the right call? Would they be better working with everyone or splitting off and leaving? Then, later on, when people break into the room, have it be an actual ambush. Have things go south for a bit before Evan gets a hold of his gun and shoots the guy attacking him. Knowing that they now have guns, the rest of the men flee, and when all the dust settles, they realize it was seemingly the reasonable man from earlier. Have them actually be somewhat shocked by this. Have them shocked by this. Have even Evan talk about how, while he didn't want to give up his food to the man, he didn't think he would go this far to try to take it from them. Showing that the situation is deteriorating enough for people to get desperate enough to attack others for supplies. Showing that people, while not starving, are already preparing for the worst. This not only creates an interesting dynamic, but also increases their drives to get home to their families who might be suffering the same thing. That's just my thought, though. I wouldn't be a right critique if I wasn't offering ways how to improve yourself. Chapter 4. Back on the home front. Chapter 4 is a fat lot of nothing, and it's just exposition and list. It goes back to Evan's wife, Molly, and you think you're going to get some nice, interesting dynamic by showing the events from her point of view in Tennessee, offering an interesting perspective from how different areas are handling it. But no, not really, because in fact, this is just so Bird can show you how amazingly prepared that Evan was for this, and how totally not insane he was with how much he fortified his house. I'm talking, he's made metal shutters for all his windows so he can lock his house down. Surrounded his house in a bush called Firethorn, where it won't kill you, but if you get stabbed by anything, you feel like those points of connect are on fire. And you have a gigantic list of guns, which include a 50 cal, which... Also, I want to see if this makes sense to anyone. Jake, Evan's son, is noted as being upset when his family first moved out to the home front, because it took him farther away from his friends. So his mother, in her brilliant wisdom, decided to cut down on travel and homeschools him. And for some reason that makes everything better. Does anyone who have a basic understanding of this tell me? I feel like that would make the situation worse, because now he can't even interact with his friends at school. Anyways, and to be 100% pedantic, civilians are not allowed to own 50 caliber rifles of any kind. And the fact that Evan got his hand on a 50 cal rifle means he engaged in black market gun dealing. So much for being a proud, law-abiding citizen who only breaks the laws when he really has to, as he says later in the book about himself. And since Chapter 5 gets quite a bit, I will actually pause it here. This section has been awful, but it's the starting section. The book could always get better as things go on. Sometimes the first part of the book is arguably the worst. So, if you like this review, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. And tune in for the next time if you like to see me suffer. Alright, I'll see you guys later.